Hello everybody, welcome! In this video I will be cooking and rating several recipes from the golden age of Hollywood. These recipes were originally featured in movie fan magazines and claim to be original favorites of popular movie stars. Of course, we don't actually know for sure whether these stars actually used the recipes, because like today's tabloids, a lot of information featured in these magazines were simply just made up. But nevertheless, even if it's all a phony, I still think it's very interesting indeed, and I can't wait to try out the recipes. By the way, this video is actually a sequel to my original Old Hollywood Recipes video that I made last year, so if you haven't watched that one yet, then I featured some rather insane recipes by the likes of Judy Garland, Rita Hayworth, and more, so do check it out. Anyway, enough talking, let's head into the kitchen and get cooking. Hello there! The first recipe I'll be trying is a tomato and cheese ball salad by Dolores Del Rio. As far as I know, it was published around 1937. I did unfortunately have to make a couple of alterations because of dietary requirements as well as lack of availability for some of the items. The first ingredient is 85 grams of feta cheese, my substitute for Roquefort because aged cheeses seem to trigger my migraines. Next, we have 1 package of cream cheese, and the recipe says to mash it all together with a fork. It's not too easy, but I get there eventually. Now I would need to add a minced pimento, but my local supermarket doesn't stock any. Too extravagant for rural New Zealand, I suppose, so I'm using a red capsicum instead. I also need a chopped green capsicum. Now I'll add it to the cheese mixture. Next comes a teaspoon of chives and 1/4 of a cup of nuts. The recipe calls for pecans, or pecans? But once again, I couldn't find any in the store, so pistachios it is. I'm crushing them with a rolling pin and adding them to the mix. Tastes pretty good so far. Our next ingredient is cream. Oh dear, what a mess! I try my best to guess how much spilled into the bowl and how much more I need to add. Another bump in the road is the whisk attachment refusing to connect with the electric mixer. In the end, I just whip the cream using the blender, and it works! Time to mix it all together. The last ingredient is a dash of cayenne. Don't worry, I'll speed up the mixing for you. Here's the finished cheese, in more flattering lighting. Now off it goes, into the freezer for a little while. Bye now! In the meantime, I'm going to start peeling some tomatoes. Is that really necessary? Well, whatever you say, Dolores. It turns out to be rather fiddly and time-consuming. I peel 3 tomatoes in total and cut each into 4 slices. The tomatoes are to be arranged, quite artistically in fact, on top of crisp lettuce leaves. Now for a sprinkling of salt and finally the cheese balls. First, I try to be neat and shape the cheese using 2 spoons, but eventually I give up and just use my hands. It's much more efficient. Presenting from my rainy porch because it's too dark inside, Dolores Del Rio's tomato and cheese ball salad. Let's try it! It is so good. The cheese goes perfectly with the salad. It's fresh, creamy, with a perfect spicy edge and really well balanced flavors. The capsicum and nut add a very nice texture. Honestly, it's a 10 out of 10 from me. I love this, and I adore salads, so you know I'll be making this again. And not to mention what a pretty looking salad it is too. In today's kitchen adventure, I'll be making not one, but 2 recipes from vintage Hollywood. How nice of you to join me once again. Please excuse the less than perfect lighting today. It's a gloomy winter day, so even though it's only early afternoon, it's practically dark indoors. First up is a recipe for hot rolls by Harlow, which I'm very excited about. I've never made proper bread before, so this is a first for me. We start with 1 cup of warm milk, followed by half a cup of butter and shortening mixed. The recipe calls for a cake of yeast, but I have instant dry yeast instead, which hopefully won't need to set for so long. I pour the yeast into half a cup of warm water, like the recipe says, and add it to the bowl. Next up is 1 well-beaten egg. One teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. While mixing, I see that the butter hasn't really melted the way it should. Maybe the milk wasn't warm enough. To hopefully melt the butter and get rid of all the lumps, I make a water bath of sorts to warm the bread mixture up. Fingers crossed! And what do you know? It actually works! Now let's continue. The recipe says enough flour to make a soft dough. So I add a couple of tablespoons at a time to make sure I get the consistency right. I probably shouldn't have been so fussy because it ends up taking me ages. But finally, many tablespoons later, my soft dough is finished and I'm awfully proud. Now I'm going to cover it up and let it rest for at least an hour. In the meantime, I'm starting on my final recipe, banana nut bread by Marlene Dietrich. I begin by preheating the oven. Hopefully, I can time it so that when the banana bread is ready to go in the oven, the dough will have finished resting. Sift 1 3/4 cups of flour. Then sift again, this time adding 3/4 teaspoon baking soda, 1 1/4 teaspoon cream of tartar, and half a teaspoon salt. After mixing, I transfer everything into a smaller bowl and set it aside for later. Now I just can't help but sneak a peek at my bread dough. Oh my goodness, it's massive already. Crazy. Take a look at that! Let's continue. Cream 1/3 of a cup of shortening together with 2/3 of a cup sugar, adding sugar gradually. The recipe says to cream until light, but I feel like my mixture doesn't look exactly right. Now onto the eggs. I have to add them one at a time, beating well after each addition. Next, I'm adding half the dry ingredients. Then I take 1 banana, the star ingredient, and mash it thoroughly. It's not very easy, probably because the banana isn't as brown as it should be. An eternity later, it's done, and I can add it into the batter, mix it in, and add the rest of the dry ingredients. There we are, all done. Quite the arm workout. But wait, there's more. Half a cup of chopped walnuts. Almost forgot. But now the banana nut bread can be poured into the loaf pan, rather clumsily as it turns out, because the mixture is on the solid side, and baked in the oven for about an hour. Au revoir! Time to continue with Jean Harlow's recipe. The dough is absolutely massive and I'm really looking forward to working with it. First, I prepare a large surface with flour for rolling out the dough. Then the fun begins. The dough is supposed to be rolled to 1/4 of an inch thickness and cut with a biscuit cutter. Then it is to be brushed with melted butter and have another biscuit placed on top. The top biscuit will also be brushed with the butter. I must admit, this recipe is definitely the most fun to make out of all three. Plus, the dough is rather delicious. All done. Aren't they cute? Now they have to stand for a bit, just in time for the banana nut bread to come out of the oven. The kitchen is such a mess that I have no idea where to put the bread. I'd say it's definitely time for a cleanup. After some tidying, it's off into the oven for the hot rolls. The recipe says it will take 10 minutes. Oh my goodness, just when I thought they couldn't get any bigger. And they're finished. Now let's taste today's creations. Presenting Jean Harlow's Hot Rolls. These rolls are soft, fluffy and delicious. They would go great with both sweet or savory toppings. They look fantastic and were a lot of fun to make. I give them a 9 out of 10, as they'd be a little plain without toppings, but I absolutely love this recipe and will certainly be making it again. Last but not least, Marlene Dietrich's banana nut bread. Cheers! This bread is delicious. It's crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside, exactly how I like it. It was slightly salty at times, which was probably my fault, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. It has a lovely nutty banana taste that would be perfect with a coffee. 8 out of 10. And those were all the recipes. brought to you by Vintage Hollywood. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye for now.